There's two things every human being is looking for. We're looking to be loved and we're looking to be needed. Every one of us. I don't care if it's your children, your child, your coworker, a person that's serving you at the bank. They're looking for two things: to be loved and to be needed. To be loved is this person genuine? Is this person, like we talked about earlier, how you doing? Oh, I'm fine. Like, that's disingenuous. But when you actually look in someone's eyes, say, how are you doing? And that's communicating love. So love. Right. And then needed is the second one. And that is like, does it matter if I'm here?
Right.
Does it matter?
Welcome to the It Matters podcast. I'm your host, Walter Perez, and let's dive in as we help you grow your mindset and elevate your leadership. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the It Matters podcast. Thanks for joining me in another episode. I'm so grateful to have you along this journey. And, I feel that my call is to bring you conversations, thoughts, and leadership principles that will add value to you. And one way that I can do that is by bringing guests on to this podcast that will help us think different. And today is no different. I have my special guest, Jeremiah Raible, with me today. And we had an amazing conversation on leadership. Jeremiah's background is in pastoral leadership. He works in the church. But please don't be closed off to this, because the leadership principles and wisdom and advice that he brought are amazing. They're incredible. They apply in any arena. They will apply in wherever you get to lead. And so you're going to learn something today, because I definitely did. We dive into the conversation about intentional leadership, the importance of how does it look like to live on purpose. He threw out that phrase, servant leadership. You probably heard that before, but I love his take on it, the importance that he puts on it, and why we should all be considering it as well. We talked about communication. He's a communicator. He speaks to hundreds of churches, but he really dissected it for us, that it's not just about communicating on stage, but also in that one-to-one relationships, and why communication for a leader is ultra important. And of course, he'll talk a little bit about his faith and why that's important to him, and how he has integrated leadership into all of that. But follow along, come on this journey in this conversation that I've had with him. He is an amazing leader, and I think you're going to learn quite a few things today. And so without further ado, here's our conversation. All right, everybody, welcome back to the It Matters podcast. Man, I have a special guest. His name is Jeremiah Raible, and welcome to the show. Thanks for coming out.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Walter.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this, and I'm glad, you and I have had coffees, and we've got to know each other over the past year or so, and this is good.
Yeah.
But hey, why don't you kick us off here and just tell us a little bit about what you do, what you're all about, so we can get to know you a little bit.
Absolutely. Well, I have been a pastor for about 27 years. And in that time, I've done all sorts of things, from youth to music to young adults to working on the mission field. And most recently, I serve as a church coach. An effectiveness coach is the title. And I work with pastors and ministry leaders in churches across Alberta and the Northwest Territories, about 130 of them, to help them in their ministry. And I also work with a bunch of other nonprofits as well, to help them to be more effective in achieving the goals that they have set out to achieve.
That's so good. You and I've had leadership conversations, and I know that you're passionate about that, and we're going to dissect that a little bit today. But I have to tell you a little story really quickly, and I think I've mentioned this to you, but I'll remind you. When my wife met you and your wife, you guys were doing a market, because your wife is a vendor at these type of markets. And one thing that really stuck out, you didn't know my wife, you didn't know me, but the servant heart, the way you were available to help out, you didn't care who she was. And my wife just remembers that going, man, there's something different about him. And then, of course, you and I interacted later. And as I got to know you more, and I'm like, of course. But you were just living it out. And I just want to tell you, how cool is that regardless of what arena you're in, what space you're in, you're the real deal. And I just wanted to tell you that I appreciate you. And it's so awesome.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that. Thanks for noticing. It's really, leadership is servanthood, and it needs to be with us wherever we go. And so we're servants first before we're anything else. So it's great that we can do that and live it out. It's always nice to get caught in a good act.
Well, that's what we desire to do, right? And I think it's a reminder for all of us, regardless of the role or position we live in. Like it matters how we live life out in the world, and I just love how you exemplify that. And yeah, thank you for being such a great example, not only to me but to many others.
Awesome.
So you mentioned the word effectiveness, coach, right? Or tell me a little bit more about that, because I found that very interesting when I saw that as one of your titles. How does that look like? I mean, not many people use that title, but no. I don't want to just the word, has a lot of meaning behind it. But tell us a little bit about what's behind that.
Yeah, well, we got all different types of coaches. A sports coach, we got leadership coach, we got life coach, and the effectiveness coach moniker was really used to focus on just that. How can we be effective? And when it comes to working with churches and with pastors, none of us get into this job to be ineffective. Yeah. We all want to make a difference, but it's kind of one of these areas where the job is never done. And so over time, you can kind of feel like, man, I'm preaching to the same 20 people, 30 people. I've been doing this for 5, 10, 15 years. What exactly have I done? And it's not for lack of trying, but I think it's for lack of understanding where the target is. And so effectiveness is really about helping leaders paint a target and then helping them to fit that target. It's the old Charlie Brown comic strip where, he would shoot the arrow and then paint the target where the arrow landed. And I think we're trying to get away from that and say, no, God has called you here. He's called you at this time. He's called you in this place for a purpose, but we got to figure out what that purpose is. And I tell you, it's not just to sit in your office. It's not to talk to the same people. It's not just to, do potlucks and socials. And so it's actually to point you, to aim you to the mission field and effectiveness in that mission field. Because you got to remember, there's a stewardship issue involved. There's money going into your salary. There's money going into your budget and into the building that you're maintaining. And the question has to be by the end of the day, so what purpose did that serve? And so what is our aim and our target here? And I believe, that it is the Great Commission. And so we are aiming for effectiveness in the Great Commission. Jesus said to his disciples to go and make disciples. So go and make more disciples. And that, of course, that word is make disciples. Who make disciples? So there's not just a one generation, but he commanded them to that would be continual. And then the second part is to teach them to obey everything that I've commanded. So, are we making disciples? Are people coming to faith in Christ in our churches, in our ministry? And then what does that look like to become a fully devoted follower of Christ? Have we thought that through? And are we intentionally help people walk that out? So
I love that.
Long version of just saying it's really about honing that in. Is I could be a life coach. I mean, I could sit there and, talk to you and I could counsel and all that. But really what I'm interested in doing is God's called you here. We have one only life. Let's make it count, and let's get going together.
I love that, and I want to point out to anybody who's listening to this, especially if you're listening to this episode today and you're going, "Well, I'm not too sure about this whole spiritual thing or faith thing." There's some great things that you're going to talk about today that apply, and as I think about the word effectiveness and even what you just so wonderfully explained, it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're really trying to get leaders to be on purpose, like to really not just show up and kind of be careless and wander through life and in their roles to understand, hey, your job has meaning, specifically when it comes to the church and the calling and the mission that we have. Like, we need to be on purpose and make sure that we're not just mishandling this.
And it's the kind of conundrum of leadership, because the tasks at hand always take precedent, but they're not always the most important things to do, right? So you got to pay the bills, you got to manage people, you got to do this, but they're not always the most important thing. And leadership requires sacrifice and requires you to do only the things that you can do and delegate the things that others can do, for the sake of, yes, sticking on that mission. And we can make the mission, the purpose, all sorts of things, right? So we can make our mission people, to make people happy. That's our mission. And so we're going around our office, placating people and being friendly and whatever, but we're not getting anything done. We're not really accomplishing. And so, or we can make the bottom line our purpose and forget about the people around us. And so it's just helping kind of refine, listen, what is it that we're here to do? What's going to be a success? And then let's coach and work towards that.
So I know that, you travel around. We were chatting before hopping on to the podcast that you work with a lot of different leaders, and I love that. You inspire me, whether you're posting on social media or whatever. Like, it's pretty neat to see you at work. But here, maybe a bit of a silly question. You're working in this role. You have a job. Are you coming from an angle of you're trying to be proactive, so where you're trying to get leaders and pastors to not fall into this trap of not being effective? Or are you seeing in our culture right now that this is there's a gap out there and we need to call leaders up, per se, or and invite them into saying, hey, get on mission, get on purpose?
Well, I think the natural tendency for every one of us is to drift off mission. Like, I don't drift to health, right? Like, I joke around, I say people, I don't drift to salads. I drift to cookies. You know what I mean? Like, if I'm snacky, I'm not snacking on a salad. So I think we're all stuck. I think a lot of us are stuck. And even the ones that are moving forward get stuck. That's the thing. Even if you've seen success in your business or in your ministry or whatever, you'll get stuck. It's the natural tendency. So when you get stuck, not if, but when you get stuck, who's there to help you see your blind spots and take you to that next level? The leadership guru John Maxwell says that every leader has a lid, and that we become the lid of the organization. And so kind of my role has been to either proactively help people raise the lids, and we do that through our blogs and our articles and our training, and we do that because people catch it and they kind of lift the lid on themselves before they get to the max. But then a lot of time we just come when people are stuck, and we're there to help them kind of lift that lid, figure some new ways through, and make some key decisions that are going to kind of get them unstuck and move them forward again in that purposeful right direction.
That's so good. And so it makes me wonder here, because you've said a lot of really great things in the last couple of minutes here. So how do you define leadership in your arena, though, in your role? Because like you've used words like stewardship, right? You've talked about not being capped, about elevating. And I think a lot of what you just said encompasses this. But do you have a thought when it comes to saying, well, the way I'm defining leadership with the pastors that I work with is like this?
Personally, I do define as servant leadership.
Okay.
I think that is the greatest form of leadership. And you identified that in our first part of the talk, where you talked about your wife, and I'm not trying to brag about it. I'm just saying that's an indicator to me that I'm following by what I talk about. I think leaders, before they're anything else, we're to serve. We're to serve others. You're not here to serve me. I'm here to serve you. I think the second definition I often use, and this has just kind of been my experience, is, and again, it's a John Maxwell adage, but it's the leadership is influence. Yeah. I have managed to exert an enormous amount of influence, and I'm not even the boss. I don't sit at the key chair of my organization. I never have. I
Mm.
never have sat at the key chair. I've always been in that second or third chair.
Okay.
But I found ways to exert influence
Yeah.
by taking that servant posture, by constantly ideation, giving ideas, and then getting things done when I'm asked to get things done, taking the ball and running with it.
Mm.
I think with the people that I work with, I challenge them to be leaders who bring alignment to the mission. Again, a lot of pastors, we're people pleasers. We're nice people,
Mm.
and we want to make sure people are cared for and happy. And that's all well and good, but when God has placed you there and given you a vision, vision doesn't always unite, right? Vision sometimes divides, because if I
Yeah.
know, okay, you want to go here, like, for an example, let's say we're going to go out to eat after this, and you want to go to A&W,
Yeah.
and I want to go somewhere else. Well, you'll say, well, this is where we're going. And I might not come with you. I might want to have lunch with you.
Right.
But once you decide where you're going, I might back out. That's vision. I mean, that's a very simplistic form of vision.
Of course.
But leaders need to catch that when they set a direction and a course. There's a challenge there. Not everyone's going to go with them. So we really define leadership for our pastors and our nonprofits as set a direction and hold us to alignment on that vision, and try not to get off course.
Yeah.
And again, that's often what happens to organizations with good intentions, is they get mission drift. And they make the mission about something else, something that's urgent, something that's in their face, something that aligns with maybe something that's more comfortable with them. But they forget, oh no, wait a second. Sometimes I have to say no to get to where I'm going. Sometimes I have to politely, but not bring this person with me in order to get where I'm going. And that's a very hard thing to do. And so that's kind of, those are the, I don't know, that's the matrix in which I view leadership in those different areas. I hope that makes sense.
It does make sense. I mean, it gets me to think. Somebody once said that many leaders out there have said that vision leaks, and you have to have it at the forefront. The word that comes to mind too is clarity. And I think what you're just explaining, the importance of having that understanding, that clarity of where we're going. So then there's power when you go and say, no, that's not where I want to go, or where I think I should be, right?
And I think in my world, we find that people find themselves in these positions. They find, they've at some point they've felt God say, you're to do this, and so they go to the right channels. They go to Bible college or seminary, and they end up in these positions. But they're leading in these positions, and they find themselves ineffective. They find themselves dealing with things that don't give them life. And the answer is, unfortunately, to lead. You have to lead. And I had one pastor say to me, I used to think that leadership was about spinning plates. He talked about, like, he goes over to this group and gets them, or no, doing the dance. I go up here and I do this well, and I do this well into these different groups, and I kind of get everybody. But he says, you came along and taught me, no, that's not my job to keep everybody happy. My job is to set vision and to bring everybody along. And he goes, and I've been doing that for the last year, and it's been the greatest leadership. It's been the greatest run of my life up this far. And this is a guy he had been in ministry for 25 years.
Wow.
And he'd just been spending a lot of his time keeping people happy. It's what he observed in his own, growing up in the church. It's what he observed. It's what his personality lends itself to, people pleasing. And yet here he is learning, actually, no, that's not my job. I don't have to be rude about it. I don't have to be mean about it, but I have to set the direction. And my question to people who find themselves leading in positions of leadership, if not you, who?
Ooh.
Tell me who then. Like, if you can't do it and you don't want to do it, then point me to someone who can.
Right.
Because this is why we're here. And nobody wants to be ineffective. Nobody wants to have gone 5-10 years sitting on their hands, putting out fires, but not really seeing the fruit.
Yeah.
And I never try and be rude to people. I never try and dismiss, I'm never trying to do that, but I am gently challenging them and calling them out to say, hey, maybe it's time to step into something new.
Yeah. You know what I really appreciate about what you do, Jeremiah, is that, and please receive this, I see you being a leader of leaders. And I don't know if that's always been your desire, because I know you've done a lot of different roles in your life, but like you must be having a lot of fun in this season of your life, and it can't be easy. But did you always want to be working with leaders? I mean, pastors are leaders. They have responsibilities over a lot of people. So, has that always been the desire for you?
Yeah, I mean, I use the term help the help. I heard
Okay.
it somewhere. I like that term. I mean, we're all supposed to be helpers. This goes back to my servant leadership axiom. But um, I think we should always be developing the leaders around us, always. So I spent 2 decades in pastoral ministry,
Yep.
and in those 2 decades, I have developed leaders.
Hmm.
So people from the congregation who started out by saying, "Hey, I want to help out with this," and then I've taken them and developed them into something. Okay, you're not just going to sing in my choir. Now you're going to lead worship. You're not just going to be leading worship. You're going to be running the choir now. And so and that's just been the thing. So when I'm sitting with leaders, people who have the position,
Yeah.
it's no different for me because I think everybody has a God-given destiny.
Hmm.
Everybody's on this journey.
Yep.
You have a leadership role right now, but you still have a long ways to go. So do I.
Of course.
So the
Yeah.
idea is whenever we're sitting and talking, we should always be spurring one another on and
Yeah.
challenging one another to keep moving forward. What's a gap? Let's close it. Okay, now what's another gap? Let's close it. And I don't really see a difference. I'm here to serve. That's the statement I use, and I don't care if you're whatever position you the title you have.
Yeah.
I'm going to serve you like I would serve anybody.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
100% it does. And that's the neat thing about it. And I mean, you're hitting this home. We all have the ability to serve. I just, you hear people say, well, I don't know if I'm a leader or if I could be a leader. And it's like, well, let's stop. I mean, you've already hit it with John Maxwell's influence quote, but serving, like we can all serve regardless of who the person is, right?
Yeah, and what I would say is that it's serving with intention. You're hoping for an outcome,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
I go back to the story you gave with your wife. And she was pulling stuff out of her car to set up for this market, right? And so
Mhm.
my motivation to serve was just to help her.
Yeah.
But probably if I would have been a bit more, and I did actually ask her story, I got to know her a little bit.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
I think where you have to add a layer of intention to
Mm.
your serving. Do you know what I mean? Because you'll have people say exactly that. Well, I can serve, but that's not leadership. Okay,
That's
I
right.
would agree because you need to add a little layer of intention. So, like asking someone their story, and then once they share their story, maybe give an encouraging word. Like, wow, that's inspiring to me. Like, I think you're really good at this. You're great at asking people their stories. When you hear their story, then you don't just, say thank you. You make a comment. You say, wow, this is what that taught me. And so what you do when you're doing that, I think that's leadership because you're giving,
Mm.
right? And then you're receiving and then you're giving back. And so
Oh,
I think every one of us
love
can
that.
do that. Every one of us can do that. But there's a lot of people that just serve, but with no there's no intentionality
Right.
towards the other person.
Right.
So what I would be advocating for is could you add a little layer of intentionality so that when you're serving with somebody, let's say, you're also asking them their story. And when they share their story, you would say something like, well, thank you for honoring me with that story. That is
Oh,
fantastic. And you know what I see in you? And then you just give a little nugget. In fact, I did that the other night at that church I was doing a workshop at.
yeah.
And there was a guy there who had just moved in from Cameroon. He's been
Uh-huh.
there for 5 months in Canada. And I mean, we were busy. There was lots going on. And I just asked him quickly his story, how he got here. And at the end, I just said, thank you for sharing that story with me. That is inspiring. And he looked at me like, you thought that was inspiring? I said, Yeah, you're enduring the hardships of moving to this country, learning the language. You told me you didn't have a place to live. And God provided, and you've been. I just said, I just want to thank you for sharing. That has really inspired me to be a better citizen in my country. And so I would say that's leadership, because now I've influenced him, and he's walking away going, I did a good thing today by sharing my story.
Yeah.
So small, I know it's not being the CEO of a company, but like you said, everybody can do that.
That's so good. The word is intentional. And you're right. And we live in a culture where we can, I was having a conversation with somebody the other day where, we can ask somebody, hey, how are you doing? But we're not really caring about how they're actually doing. We're just going through the formalities of like, well, this is just how we greet. But you're right, to break that down and go, no, let's choose to be intentional and let's go deeper. And that's how we're going to impact lives.
It's so easy for us to just take, or be transactional. Everything is a transaction. I do this, you do that, and that's it. It's cause for pause. You have to be mindful to take those little moments and try and interject some kind of encouragement or question, or reflection moment to exert some level of influence or encouragement and we all get caught in just doing the same old. We all do,
Yeah.
When can we take a breath and ask ourselves, okay, so I got this couple coming over tonight, for dinner. What could I say?
Right.
That could be encouraging to them. And I think if you just do that kind of stuff, or questions that you ask or whatever, I really think that can help change someone's trajectory.
Yeah.
But
So I'm wondering then here, because you get to work with a lot of leaders, and with what you just said, I mean, I think you've experienced where people are not connecting enough or they're not going deeper. But is there a common mistake that you're seeing leaders make out there that they could tweak and it would change, a lot for them? Is there something that kind of comes to mind that you're maybe seeing a pattern in?
absolutely. I mean, one of the first things is that idea of developing others and delegating. And I don't mean just, I don't want to do this, you do it. I mean actually seeing something in somebody and using the tasks that you normally do to build people.
Right.
We often say we don't use people to do tasks, we use tasks to develop people. And
Right.
so if you can kind of get into that more, where, and this happens a lot in our field with pastors, is they end up doing most of the ministry themselves. So they're going to the visitation, they're doing the preaching, they're doing those, and I'm just saying, could you bring someone along with you? Could you just find ways to develop people? I think even in doing that, even in making that an intentional part of your life, totally changes how you are, because now you're always thinking about others. And then I think the second thing is, like I've said before, it's just we make it about the wrong thing. We make what we're doing the purpose, about good things. I'm not saying they're bad, but they're the wrong things, and they get us off doing the right things. You know what I'm saying? And so we convince ourselves then, well, this is what it is, and it's not. There's another way. And so I think just helping our leaders interrupt that pattern and say, well, could there be something else that's more effective than what you're currently doing to actually help you achieve the outcome that you're supposed to achieve? And remember, in my line of work, our outcomes are given to us by Christ himself. So you can't really debate it. When Jesus says, go and make disciples, I mean, I can go to any church and say, tell me how that's happening and where that's happening. And if it's not, well, the big guy said it. Why aren't we doing it? And so, that's kind of where I think for me in my line of work, I have a little bit of a different line of authority that I can work from. But I think for any leader, we really need to look at, are we doing the right, are we achieving the outcomes that we want to achieve? There was I can't remember who it was, it might have been Peter Drucker, said every result you're getting is designed, what you've been doing is designed to get the results you're getting. Right. So if you don't like the results that you're getting, you got to change what you're doing. And that's kind of an age old adage that I think a lot of leaders need to pay attention to.
Timeless though.
Yeah.
Like it just, hey, do you think that considering in the culture or the time that we're living in, technology is crazy out there. When I mean, AI, you're talking about the different tools and equipment out there that we can be using. Do you think that's making leadership better, easier to deal with, or do you think it's giving us a challenge in some way?
I think it's in the heart. The beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I think technology is in the heart of the user. I think if the user has a view to learn and to grow and to utilize these things as tools to augment, to enhance, as opposed to shortcuts to replace. I mean, there's no shortcut for good leadership. There's just no. AI cannot give you. It just can't. It'll shortcut it, but it won't give you. You need to trust your gut. You need to develop your sensibilities, your EQ. You need to read the room.
Yeah.
Your tone. Your demeanor. All of that plays into great leadership, and you can't replace that with technology. You can enhance what you do. I mean, I'm a huge advocate. I take notes everywhere I go because I can't remember things. I'm loving the tool that records notes in meetings. A note taker, a companion tool. I am loving that because at the end it kind of says you'll do this, and I said, this is wonderful.
Yeah.
But it's not leading the meeting for me. I'm leading the meeting. I click the button.
Yeah.
I'm leading that meeting. So I when it comes to technology, I say, it's a tool in your hand to use, and you can use old tools, you can use new tools. We're not much different than a carpenter or a mechanic, right? And you use that tool and hopefully you get the job done. But it's your expertise. It's the nuance that you bring to the situation, which is your personality, right? Your personality, your mental space, your read on the situation, coupled with what's happening on the other side of that, of you, the person, the situation. You got to learn to lead that well.
It's a beauty. I love how you explain that, because at the end of the day, something that this technology can't do is do the actual connecting, people to people connection. And as leaders, that is our job. And to make sure that we're not taking shortcuts, we're not trying to, technology is not going to replace that. So let's make sure that we're still developing ourselves and learning and growing, right? And
if you can't use it, don't. If it's going to make things worse, don't use it. I remember a story when I was a child, and my mom got my dad used to always lose his keys. My mom got him this key finder that when you whistled, it would chirp. Well, the problem is my dad couldn't whistle. So he'd run around the house going, and it wouldn't work, And so, if you're going to use technology, you got to be able to use it. You got to be able to use it well. If you just plug it in because, that's the new thing that we do,
right?
It is not going to serve you.
Yeah, that's a great example. So true. You can't just be jumping on bandwagon and just because, hey, it's out there.
Yeah,
that's funny. So I've been hearing this theme as I've been talking to different leaders, even business owners and all that. This word alone keeps coming up in this idea of like leaders feel alone. Mm-hmm. And I was very interested in asking you this because you do work with a lot of different pastors. Is that a concern that you're seeing, that a lot of leaders are trying to do this on their own? Like they're missing out on the community part of it, or connecting with other people?
Yeah, I mean, I notice in the West, and in our culture in the West, we do have a very individualistic, isolationist culture. So when you move here to Canada or, into North America, I think it is kind of the self-made person. And I don't think anybody really would articulate that, but that's kind of the trade winds that blow, because that's the stories you hear, I did this on my own, and so you just so I think it starts with that. But then I think our natural tendency is to when we're faced with a difficult situation, our tendency is to turtle. Not all of us do, but I think the majority of human beings, we will go within ourselves, inside of ourselves, to try and sort it. Part of that is we're afraid, afraid of rejection or afraid of how other people are going to handle it. Part of it is just our own processing power, that protective nature of who we are. So when you have culture and you got human tendency, yeah, that's why you got people feeling alone and behaving in such a way that is pushing others away.
Right.
So the only antidote for that is active community, is to remind yourself. And how many times have you done this where oh, I've got to meet with this guy, I don't want to, but you tell yourself, I gotta do it. That's you being active in community. And I think that's when you have something that is forcing you to get outside yourself and relate to people, that is very positive. And then I would, again, like we've said before, I would add the layer of intention, because that layer of intention is going to drop that surface level relationship. It's going to drop that surface to something that actually could result in something positive. So, I'll ask this question, which I feel like it drops people. I'll say, how is it with your soul? Now, when I do that, you're forced to reflect on something deeper than how's it going.
Yeah.
Right. If I say, how's it going? You're going to say things are good. You're going to talk about your work, your family, whatever. But if I say, how is it with your soul, Walter?
Yeah.
It's going to force you to go one layer deeper. To just uncover something emotional. And again, I'm not looking for your life story. I don't need you to divulge everything, so that's what I would say. If you can have relationships, partnerships with colleagues, whatever, people in your profession, yes, you can go to the mixers and have the drinks and have the, the good business connections, but there's gotta be a drop down where you're actually saying, you're actually asking questions that provoke you to think a little deeper. Does that make sense?
It does. No, 100%. I love that question because immediately, I mean, you were using it as an example, but quickly I started internalizing that and going, wow, like the surface question, I would have been like circumstantial in the sense of, well, I feel hot today. I'm a little tired.
Doing a podcast.
Right?
Yeah.
Doing a podcast. Like it just, I'm working. But when you go that layer deeper, it's incredible how you start going, well, you know what? I'm glad the weekend's here, but like I'm just trying to navigate a few things. I mean, we were talking, I have a new baby in my family, and we're in a different season right now.
And even if you never told me any of that stuff, I think even internally it would have uncovered just some own stuff. And I don't know how you would do that. I'm coming from a faith perspective. I'm not sure how you would do that, business to business, but I do think there are ways to. One of my favorite questions that John Maxwell asked is what is the best piece of advice you've ever gotten?
Yeah.
And again, that's one of those questions that it brings someone to a different layer. And I'll often talk about like their father or their mother. That's kind of where people will go when it comes to that. And then that brings out again, and that's what, again, problem with isolation and being alone is that people will say, well, just be friendlier. No, it's not as easy. It's not that simple. There's all sorts of stuff that gets in the way of feeling like we can create a place of belonging and safety and leaning in. There's all sorts of barriers to that. And we just have to have a conversation about rejection and when somebody was mean to you and harsh with you. And those are the things that create those barriers when you go to connect today, is what's happened in the past. So it's not as simple as, well, just be friendlier or just find a friend. There is a lot that has to go in to create spaces where there is good connection, positive connection, safety, belonging. And the truth of it is, I would say more often than not, we don't have that.
Right.
So you walk into any situation and most people are they've got people around them, groups around them, but they would say, I feel alone, like you said.
Yeah.
And it's an issue in the ministry. I think pastoral ministry can be one of the most loneliest places because you don't know who you can trust to be vulnerable and open. And so, and your closest friends that you want to do that with are your congregants. And so what are you going to say to your congregants about things about your life?
Right.
But then you have to get up on Sunday. It's a very tricky. So then you're forced to find that maybe in a colleague who's in another town, or in one of your district officials or whatever. But
Yeah.
but the people that you love the most oftentimes are not the people you can be fully transparent with, about everything in your life. And that can create a lot of sticky situations for people. I think I encourage pastors, obviously, to always live an authentic self.
Yep.
Always live as honestly as you can before your congregation. I'm not a fan of separating yourself.
Yeah.
I know that that's sometimes the wisdom of the day. It's not my preference, but yeah, if there's ways that you can live in a harmony and relationship and unity with a few people, boy, then you've got gold. They say that the real miracle of Jesus was not the resurrection. It was that he was in his 30s and he had 12 friends.
That's good. That's funny. Well, hey,
Because as you get older, it's harder. And I think
Yeah.
that's probably what you're talking about, is that,
Yep.
your friend group is older, the people that you're connecting with and helping in business.
Yeah.
And that's what you're hearing. I'm 35 and I got no friends.
Yeah.
I'm 46 and we do an
Right.
exercise. We say who would carry, and we do it with the men's groups that I work with. We say, write the names of the 6 guys that would be pallbearers that are not your family.
Wow.
Well, they get to 2, like most guys in that little exercise, they get to 2 and they're done. You can't find 6. I think I can get to 5, but it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
So that's a big topic to work through in leadership.
So I'm hearing and I hear you when you say it's hard. For sure, 100%, it's going to be some hard work, but it's going to be worth it, right? I mean, it's worth going through that work. And I like how you also pointed out that we may have to work through some things. Like potentially I could be robbing myself from some good relationships because of past hurt, trauma, potentially, of whatever happened in my childhood or a couple of years ago. And as leaders, we should be willing to work through that and do the hard work, because we're going to benefit from that in the long term. But of course, I mean, we're going to be able to add so much value to other leaders through our story, and maybe even guide somebody and show them, hey, this is how God came through in my life, and he can do it with you as well, right?
Yeah. Well, the most conflict that we ever face in life generally happens with other people. That's where the conflict that we face, the stress that we face has to do with others. And so, yeah, it's something that we face it every day. And if we don't learn to be better at it, we don't learn to work through some of these things, to see some of these challenges as opportunities, then we get 5 years down the road and we've just been doing the same thing the same way for the last 5 years. So yeah, it's hard, but you're right. It's work worth doing. But I do think too, we got to give ourselves a little bit of grace. And I mean, again, I'm talking about my Christian world that I'm in. I feel sometimes we have a forced vulnerability that's not healthy. So you'll walk into a circle and they'll be like, tell me your deepest fears, Jeremiah. And I'm just like, not doing that. I'm not doing that for you.
Right.
I don't know you. And so, I mean, we got to take what people give us. And I think that's where that level of intention comes. If I take what you give me, we didn't know each other from Adam, right? We just had these little shared experiences, but I take what you give me, then I'm going to drop another little intentional piece or an encouragement piece. What I thought about you, what I think about you, I'll encourage you. What's that going to do? We're going to go a little deeper.
Yeah.
But we don't become fast friends in you know what I mean? Like and if you live your life like that with everybody, little bits at a time, little opportunities at a time, you're going to have more connections than you ever thought you'd have. And they're not all going to be at the same level, right? They're going to be
Yeah.
different levels.
Yeah. Well, it's a beautiful thing because you're right. When you live life in that way, there's certain relationships that are going to elevate a lot quicker than others. And I mean, every interaction I've had with you in the past year or so, I realize that we're just getting deeper and deeper. And I love that because you just go, okay, there's
Yeah.
that encouragement, that connection. You sharpen me, you get me to think. And it's like, these are the kind of relationships that I've been desiring and looking for. And now here we are.
Yeah. One of the things that I kind of teach people too is that when you come out of yourself and you observe and comment on what this is, it's a weird thing. It drops that relationship to the next level. So we've got a couple of friends who will hang out, we'll do something, but when we're done, when we're finished that, I will often say, boy, out of all the people that my wife and I could hang out with, you guys really matter to us. This opportunity today was just gold because, and then I'll give a reason. I don't need to do that. I don't need to do that. I could have just, but what I'm doing when I do that is what I find is it unlocks a door to another level, because what they're doing is, and I'm making an objective observation about what's happening here in
Right.
this foursome or whatever, and it just all of a sudden it gets a little bit more solid. It gets a little bit more solid. And again, I often say too that in again, as a person of faith, when you pray together, you often go deeper. So I try and make it a point when I'm finished with somebody before I leave, even if it's a coffee or stand in the Starbucks parking lot, I try and say, hey, do you mind if we just pray?
That's right.
And there's something that happens when we do that we've taken that great coffee we've had, some of the good discussions and sharing, and dropped it just a little bit deeper. Because again, we're all looking for, there's two things every human being is looking for. We're looking to be loved and we're looking to be needed. Every one of us. I don't care if it's your children, your child, your coworker, a person that's serving you at the bank. They're looking for two things: to be loved and to be needed. To be loved is this person genuine? Is this person, like we talked about earlier, how you doing? Oh, I'm fine. Like, that's disingenuine. But when you actually look in someone's eyes, say, how are you doing? And that's communicating love. So love.
Right.
And then needed is the second one. And that is like, does it matter if I'm here?
Right.
Does it matter? And boy, I tell you, when you can communicate, like one of the things I like to do with servers is I compliment them on their service. I say, the way you served us today, very timely, very helpful. Was great talking to you just a little bit. We got to talk to you. I know you're busy, but I just want to thank you for the way in which you served. You see what I'm saying there?
Yeah.
So what am I saying? You're needed. Like, you do a pretty bang up job. Maybe this isn't your lifelong career, but you've done well today. Thanks. So that's an important principle. Somebody taught me that 20 years ago, and I've lived by that in every interaction I'm in, I'm looking for that. The thing beneath the thing is, am I loved and am I needed?
I appreciate you sharing that that principle, those truths, because, and you're a great example of this, but I know that there's leaders out there, and we can pick out an industry or whatever, but that get caught up in their box of leadership in their title, and they're almost, they're unrelatable, you can't connect, you can't touch them, like, and fine, but I want to argue, and what you just made a great point, that we need to be intentional and we need to notice people, and in that we're going to be able to maybe ask ourselves those questions of how can we show love to somebody and how can we show them that they're needed. I love that.
And I think it was leadership, an author, Kerry Newhoff, based out of Toronto. There, he says that nobody leaves a job; they leave a boss. And I do think, like, there is an element to that where if you're a boss, if you're a leader, you're leading people. Boy, you better be thinking about that.
I think Kerry Newhoff has nailed that one, because you're right. I've had conversations. I think at some point in my life, I probably experienced that too. And it's crazy how true that can be. And to think about, if you're in that role where you might have responsibility over people, that somebody might want to leave because of you, potentially because you weren't being a good steward of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So here, maybe this question is going to be like a given coming from you, but like, because you are a coach and you are a student of leadership and you've had training and all that, would you say it's important for leaders to engage or find coaching in some sort of way? Like, is there, would you advocate for that?
Oh, well, of course I would, but I mean, this is the pushback I always get, right? Is I don't need anybody who's done anything in their life, anybody that you know of, a singer, a musician, an athlete, a successful CEO, they've all been coached. They've all been coached. Like, so what are you talking about? You don't need a coach. Everybody needs a coach. Everybody needs somebody to help. We just celebrated the Oilers heading into the Stanley Cup final, and we, watching Connor McDavid on his little documentary afterwards, just to kind of learn a bit more about him, because we don't know much about hockey in my house, but we learned,
Right.
And he's got coaches, he's got trainers, he's got, people that are working his muscles. Like, he's not there by himself. As great as he is, and as talented as he is, he's not there by himself.
Right.
So we all need a coach. We all need a team. And I would just be saying, yeah, like what you don't know, what you don't know.
Right.
So sit down with someone. It's beneficial. I always tell people every time, I'll give you a 1 hour coaching call, like a pastor, any pastor across Canada. I'll say, email me. I'll give you a 1 hour free coaching call, because if I can just sit with you for an hour, find out what you're struggling with, find out where your church is at, ask you some key questions in 60 minutes. Like, you know what I mean? And it's not because I'm great. It's not because it's just, I know the questions to ask, and I know where I'm pointing you.
Right.
I can get you moving. And then sometimes I can get you to the resources that you might be lacking.
Right.
So I think that's a key thing. And any person that's got option and opportunity to receive some level of coaching and development.
Yeah.
The health of the leader, the growth of the leader is paramount to the success of your endeavors.
Love it. Love it. I love how you put that. So throughout this conversation, we've talked about you working with pastors. So are you in this season is it because you fully believe in the local church? I mean, you get to work, coach, impact, ministry leaders and pastors that then get to go and share the gospel, make disciples, share the love of Jesus. It does that come out of you just having this belief for the local church and what the local church can do?
Oh, well, you make it so easy. You're asking me, do you like coaching? Of course I do. Do you like the local church? Of course I do. Yes, of course. I mean, I think for me personally, I believe the local church is Christ's only tool, primary tool to fulfill the commission that he called us on. That's what he did. He didn't say come and gather. He said go and make. And then, of course, when you follow in Scripture from the book of Luke to the book of Acts, you see the ecclesia, the church, forming, and it's not an institution or it's a force. Yeah. And they're out. They're in the temple courts. They're traveling. It's a force. And so I think calling the church back to be what it is, which is a force on mission in wherever it might find himself, Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, the ends of the earth. We got to get back on mission. And I just think that the church, from what I see, is a solution to so many of the world's problems. And of course, you look back even at 20th century history, and you see the church responding to education by creating, schools and universities. That was the church.
Right.
Science. I mean, people say, well, the church is anti-science. No, it's not.
No.
I mean, so go back and look at your history and look at what Christ followers have done for the good. Now, there's negative things, but there's a lot of good things. And this is not about pushing a religion or pushing an institution. This is about helping people find and follow Jesus, who I believe is the one who made us and formed us and loved us. and is offering us a relationship with him here on earth, and guides us and leads us into our destiny. So all that to say, I love working with pastors because they're all good. They're all good people. They're all people who are trying to live for something in someone other than themselves. You know, I haven't met a single person who's in the ministry who's in it for themselves. They may be a little off mission, you know, they may, like we talked about before, but none of them are selfish. None of them. They've all given and sacrificed and served. They are the definition of servant leadership. And so I'm thankful to be in that world. I love working with nonprofits. I work with a few nonprofits. I even work with a few entrepreneurs and business, but I come at it from the same way. I don't come at it from how much money can you make. I come at it from how much good can you do, and with the profits that you make, what can you do with those profits? And most business owners I know, they would think the same way. You know, again, you can live for yourself, you know, like the great poet Bob Dylan said, you're going to have to serve somebody, right? You may be the devil, maybe the Lord, but you're going to have to serve somebody. And we all serve somebody. I don't care what you call it. We all serve. You're going to have to serve somebody.
Right.
I think most of us want to do something in this world that means something greater than ourselves. I think most people, no matter what their faith position might be or what they understand of their lives, most people want to make a positive impact in this world. And if that's what you want to do, I'm all for coaching to get there.
I love it. That's so good. Hey, I want to pivot very quickly here and with a question. Part of your role, you communicate a lot. I know, like I mentioned earlier on, I've seen you post in your social media. You're traveling, you're speaking at different churches. You're a great communicator. I got to see you a couple of months ago speaking to a big men's conference. Amazing presentation that you put together. You're just a great communicator, and thank you for that. Do you think that communication, regardless of the type of leader we are, that is one of the essential key things that we need to kind of make sure that we figure out if we're going to be better leaders?
It's the only thing. It is the one tool that you have in your tool belt as a leader that everybody has to listen to you. And so, you know, big platforms and conferences are great, but let's just start in the boardroom. Let's just start in the one-on-one and ask yourself the question. Again, we talked about, you know, being in tension with how we speak, how we, you know, ask questions. To me, that's the communication piece. It's I've got a chance. You're coming in from a one-on-one meeting. Am I spending the first 30 seconds of that meeting articulating something that's pulling you up to someplace higher? I was just at a meeting this morning, and I didn't do that. It was a community meeting, and there's a couple things I want to always say about who we are as a community entity in our organization. And I just got right into business. The other guy was leading it, and we joked a bit. I said, "Okay, go ahead, take it away." And afterwards, I realized, man, I missed my chance to say something that's going to once again pull us into. Now, remember, this is a community organization that is set to do this and this, and it would have taken me 20 seconds to do it.
Right.
I didn't do it, and I think, most of our leaders don't recognize that when they're in a meeting, when they're in a board meeting, when they're in a team meeting, that they're not articulating in a way that is going to pull people up.
Right.
They're just dealing with the task at hand. You know what I'm saying? So you have to speak. You have to speak life. You have to speak something bigger. You have to communicate to something more. And, you know, one of the things that we often say in church world is we don't communicate or preach for information. We preach for transformation. Okay. So I'm not looking to read out a commentary, you know, and just tell you the stuff that the Bible says. No, I want to preach in such a way that you're able to grasp something that's going to transform you, that's going to change the way you think, change the way you act, change. I think the same thing is true for everybody. We want to communicate for transformation. We want to help people to become better versions of themselves. You do this. You do this really well. You articulate this. We always want people to become better versions of themselves after having been with us. Because it doesn't matter if I hear what you say, if I'm the same, but if I walk away with something that I felt good, you said something to me, you encouraged me, you challenged me, that's going to change me down the road.
Right.
And I think that'll benefit you in the end. You may not ever see it directly, but it will bring benefit back to you. So this is where I think communication, never take it for granted. A lot of the breakdown in organizations has to do with communication. And I just dealing with a situation last week where one of the people that I'm working with did not seem to be able to listen and hear what I was saying. So I would say one thing, and then that person would kind of say something completely different. Like I thought it sounded like we were in two different meetings, and I just got frustrated with that. I didn't try and reframe. You know what I mean? I think I could have done a better job in the end, finding other ways to communicate. So it can be tricky,
right?
And that's where I think the breakdown happens, is when, if I don't feel like you're listening, or if I feel like I've already said this, why do I have to say it again? Well, so yeah, communication is key for effective leadership.
I love that. And I like how you've encouraged us and brought into the light that it's not, communication just doesn't happen on stage or in the big crowds. It really starts right here, one-on-one in the boardroom, like as you mentioned, and that's key.
Somebody once told me to double up on the why. Double up on the why before you get to the what and the how. And if you talk about the why, like, you know what I mean? So let's say you have say in your business, right? To equip leaders, we want better leaders. Yep. If you spent twice as much time with your colleagues talking about that, than you do about, okay, what am I doing this week? You know what I mean? Which frankly, all of us talk about the what's and the hows. That's the majority of our conversation.
That's right.
We don't do a lot of talk about the whys. Somebody this is actually just recently, they said, talk about the why twice as much as you talk about the how and the what. And that's when you're casting vision for more, right? You're saying, wow, man, what if it could be a church that reached your kids and your grandkids? What if you did this? I mean, I was speaking at an event on Tuesday, and it was a 2-hour talk. I was giving a workshop. I spent the first 45 minutes just talking about the why.
That's amazing.
Casting vision for it, sharing stories about it. People were crying, and someone said, are we going to get to the practical part? I'm like, we're going to get there, but there's no point in talking about it if you don't really understand really what the vision is here and what the mission, why we're doing this, why we're even having this discussion.
Yeah.
And then they were ready to go by the time we got to, this is how you do it. This is how this is what it's going to look like. Oh, no problem. A lot of people.
Yeah, when we understand the why, the how becomes even easier, right? The what, we're not questioning. We're like, I'm in.
Yeah, because we can push back on the what so easily.
Yeah.
If you get to like, okay, whatever, let's talk about, we're going to go on a hike, right? Yep. And what are we going to do? Where are we going to go? I can push back. I don't want to go here. I want to go. But if we spend like a good half of the time talking about why we want to hike, right? Yep. Why? What can we see on the hike? Showing me pictures of it, like different hikes, getting me excited. You know what I mean? Like we're talking about why we're going to see great views. We're going to see.
Right.
Well, by the time you get here, the options. You know what I mean? What do you think's going to happen? I'm going to pick the ones with the great views.
Yeah. Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I do think like the doubling up on the why is good advice. Again, most of the advice I'm giving here today is not my own. I wish it was. I wish I was way smarter than I sound. But I've over the years have collected tons of advice, and I just curate it now as a coach.
Well, it goes to show that you've been an amazing student, and which we all need to remember to be. We need to be lifelong learners, and here we are benefiting from years of experience from you, and I appreciate you for that.
Well, and probably everybody got something from somewhere.
Right?
I don't know if there's an original idea anymore. Maybe there is. I don't know.
I hear you. Hey, so on that note, I only got a couple more questions because this has been an amazing conversation, and you and I could probably talk for hours, but you've given us great nuggets, but is there a specific leadership advice that kind of comes to the top of your mind that you've been given, and that you just would love to share with us today?
Oh man, that is a tough one because I have been given a lot of advice over the years, and they're different. Yeah, they're on different spheres. So in pastoral ministry,
Right.
my most favorite piece of advice is walk slowly through the crowd. It was just it was a way to act when I'm with a congregation
Mm-hmm.
that makes me more accessible
Right.
and allows me to, really connect and relate to people as opposed to be task oriented.
Right.
Most recently, the advice that I was given was tie yourself to the mast when it comes to leadership.
Okay.
You pick a direction and you got to tie yourself to the mast and say, we're going this way. And because opposition is going to come,
Yeah.
right? And sometimes we say we're going to do this, and then we get a little blowback, and we kind of shift direction because of that. But
Mm-hmm.
if you really believe it, you really believe you should be doing it, why not go down with the ship? I mean, if
Right.
you really believe it,
Yeah.
and I do think that in this day and age, in the cancel culture, and everyone's got an opinion about everything, you're just not going to get consensus anymore.
Right.
You probably never had it, but you didn't know that many people, so it felt
Right.
like you had consensus. But now everybody who sees you on social media is going to have something to say, and so you're going to have to just tie yourself to the mast. And then
Right.
I think the third piece of advice I've gotten is people first. It's
Mm.
people over process every single time. So if we do a great thing but we hate each other after, I
Not
mean,
worth it.
I don't think we've achieved it, right? I think so. People first over process. We can get so focused on the process that we forget the people, and the people are what make the process beautiful and great. And at the end of the day, I don't think you'll remember a whole lot of what you did, but you will remember the people that you did it with. And when you really value people, you value the connections that you get to make. I mean, people come into our lives for such a short time, right? And looking over your life, you've got friends from when you were younger, and then you got people here. You work with colleagues, and you've had different conversations. We're in your life for a short time, but we
Mm.
can bring value if you allow us to. And I think that there's a big piece of that is just value the people that come along
Yeah.
and want to spend time with you and want to get to know you, and that's a beautiful thing. And those are the three pieces that I would give you.
That's gold. That's gold. I appreciate that. Hey, so listen, I have one final question that I like to ask everybody that comes on the podcast, and you're on the It Matters podcast, and you've given us a lot of different things from your career, your work, but is there something that matters to you right now? So like what matters to you in this moment, this season? It could be whatever related to work or not, but what comes to mind?
Always my family matters, always. And complicated families can be complicated, and relationships can be complicated, and life has a way of changing things up on us.
Mm.
And at the end of the day, if I've got a unified family, then I have a pretty stable life.
Mm.
So working towards that, focusing on that, they are your primary ministry, I believe, and they are at the end of the day, they're the only ones that are going to stand with you to the very end. So it matters to me that I'm trying to do the best. I'm trying to be present with my family. I'm trying to be encouraging with my family. I'm trying to be connected with my family, and that's a huge part for me.
Love it. That's so
Mom and
good.
apple pie. I know it's pretty basic, but I mean,
No,
you asked me that question. That's the first thing that came to my mind.
that's great. No, and I think it's a great reminder for all of us. This has been so good. I appreciate you so much. You gave us so much to think about. I think we're gonna have to dissect this and make sure that we reflect. If there was somebody out there that wanted to know a little bit more about you, maybe potentially connect with you, how could they find out more about you?
Yeah, you can find us. I mean, I'm written a lot of articles, so my name, Jeremiah Raible, is going to come up when you Google it, and then Coach at ABNWT.com is a great way to reach out if you're interested in church coaching. And then we do a great summit every year called Church Vitalization Summit. And then you can be found at churchvitalization.ca. It's a free two-day webinar that we host. And it's got all sorts of things about how do we be a church for those yet to come, and how do we reach Canadians with the gospel. And so those are the places that you can find me. Okay. And thankful for that. And I just want to say, Walter, that what you're doing, bringing positive leadership and acumen into the leadership space is so great. You're focusing us on a higher call, but practically, right? So you're balancing the two, and I'm very thankful that you do these things, and you do the connecting events that you do, and all of the effort that you put in day out to bring positive leadership acumen into our space here. I appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate you and your time and just hanging out. I hope we can do this again in the future. But thank you so much. And for everybody out there, if you have questions or comments, can you please add them? If I have to direct anything to Jeremiah, I will definitely do that. But we appreciate you tuning in. And as we love to say around here, as we get better and we improve and grow, it is a win-win when the leader leads well. And so thanks for joining us on this episode, and we'll catch you on the next one. Bye for now.